Mic check, mic check. Okay, so I'm Dr. Cool Whip, and this is my third entry for my tier list. This is going to be Blade Barrage. I rank this in the S tier bracket for subclasses for the Forsaken update. This is a particular build, or this build in particular, along with the subclass, or any subclass in general, is very functional and competitive. Chaperone and Luna's Howl is very good. I'm pairing that with Stompies for increased mobility. And I think that you will run into this build fairly often in the latter, as far as competitive grind is concerned. The Chaperone is a very good weapon. When paired with the Luna's Howl, you have two precision-based weapons that have high utility and upside. I'm using a linear fusion rifle in the heavy slot. With this, accelerated coils is another option if I feel so inclined, but the difference between 500 milliseconds and 466 milliseconds for charge time is very minimal, so I'm opting for more range to pair with the moving target perk and the rangefinder, as well as getting a little bit more impact with the projection fuse. Now, to talk about this subclass in general, I think that it has a very high amount of synergy within its abilities. It has a lot of good flex points. Its knife trick is very good and efficient at recharging your dodge. Dealing damage to burning enemies is also a very efficient means of getting more resources back as far as your abilities and your abilities uptime is concerned. I think that this is a very well-rounded subclass, and that it also happens to have one of the most powerful supers in the game. So as far as shutdown supers go, and as far as hit it and quit it supers go, this one's pretty raunchy. It'll shut down pretty much everything, including Nova Warp, and a well-timed Blade Barrage can definitely turn the tide of any game. In the competitive venue, if you have something like Shards of Galanor, which I don't, that can be an exploitive armor piece and can be very effective. However, you might also see somebody running something like Stompies. Now, I have an extremely good roll on my Stompies that pairs very well with my Luna's Howl. It has enhanced hand cannon dexterity and a hand cannon scavenger perk, so I am coupling that with a cloak that also has a hand cannon scavenger perk, and also better already, as well as a recovery mod. So I'm running a 7-2-7 split. The reason why I'm running high mobility, high recovery is because I'm using Stompies. I want to be nimble and I want to be aggressive with my build, but I want to dip in and dip out as much as possible with my Chaperone and exploit my range with Chaperone and the range bonus that it gets, as well as exploit my peak shots and my cover and my movement with my Luna's Howl. On the background, I've got some pretty good footage as far as movement is concerned, I think, that showcases a good argument for this build, or for this style of build, for a highly aggressive, highly mobile, highly tactile, precision-oriented, I want to say exploitist, or, let's see here, what's the word? I guess just tactile. Tactile exploitation of mobility and high damage output weapons. And I think that it's a fairly decent showing. Now, later on in this clip, also shows the inherent weaknesses of a type of build like this, but along with that, there's some pretty decent footage of the strengths and benefits that this subclass has in general. So it has good ability synergy, and what you're going to see me really focus on in this game is movement and using my abilities within the subclass to take advantage of my dodge uptime. I do have two Paragon mods in my arms and in my chest piece, but I am going to be exploiting my abilities as much as I can and exploiting my exotic as much as I can to gain upside with the subclass that I'm using. The nice thing about using Stompies as well is that if you use something like triple jump or high jump or even strafe jump, you have added mobility and added control while you're in the air. That can lead to some very unique types of plays, and while Stompies doesn't do anything really outside of movement, it increases your slide distance, which makes slide shotgunning with the Chaperone feel extremely good. I use it every once in a while with Way of the Wraith, which is going to be in the next video. But I think that Stompies in general are just a very well-tuned, nicely balanced feel piece. When I say feel piece, I mean just make things feel really good. So yeah, I love the Stompies, and I love Stompies with triple jump. I also really like using Stompy High Jump. I think that that's really fun. I tend to use that with Night Stalker, the Way of the Trapper, because I think it's really funny to go invisible and then jump as high as I can and then rain bullets down on people from above, because they just usually don't expect it. Anyways, moving back to the S tier designation for the Way of a Thousand Cuts, or as it is colloquially termed, Blade Barrage. Mainly because the super is called Blade Barrage. It's just easier to say than Way of a Thousand Cuts. But this subclass itself has very good utility. You can recharge your dodge while enemies are burning. You can dodge to get your knife trick back. Your knife trick does efficient damage as well as burn enemies, and you can pair it with called incendiary grenades to increase your uptime, which is something that I'm doing in this particular build. Normally I like to use swarm grenades or use trip mine. Trip mines are kind of my favorite, and I use those because they have high damage output. But incendiary grenades is probably going to be the most synergistic grenade to use with this subclass. It does take a little bit of skill to get used to bouncing the grenade, the incendiary grenade, but when you get used to the mechanics of the grenade, it feels pretty good and rewarding. Yeah, so I think that you can get away with a multitude of builds and setups and gear sets with this subclass, which makes it very versatile. It doesn't have any gun or weapons synergy outside of the mechanic called Burning Edge, where killing enemies that are burning gives you ability uptime back. So there goes the Blade Barrage. That's a reactive super, or a lot of people in the community call them panic supers. Everybody that's played Destiny knows the term panic slam or panic bomb. Basically what that means is that you can just hit a button and then all of a sudden the thing that was in front of you is no longer in front of you. And that's a really nice thing. Blade Barrage has a unique feel to it because it has an added movement added into the animation, which gives you this kind of feeling of reactive manipulation of your environment and reaction to what it is that you're engaging. And I really enjoy the feel of the subclass. It has really nice synergy, again, to reiterate the point that I keep making, but it also has a very powerful super. Again, it can shut down pretty much anything on the map. The only thing that really counters Blade Barrage as far as supers go is Wave the Current. And that is only because they can block and reflect your blades. I'm not entirely certain about the Ursa Furiosa thing. I think for the most part you can shut down an Ursa build using this, although they might be able to block all the damage. But maybe if you use Stompy High Jump and get up above their defense, you can get in on that action. So I think that this is a very viable subclass. You see it a lot in the competitive venue, because you can pair it with the Shards of Galanor and have a lot more uptime with your super, as well as wipe the enemy team and make some big plays. And now I think in the competitive playlist, people have really caught on to that particular playstyle, so they don't tend to cluster up as much, and I think the player base in Destiny 2 in general is a much more competent player base. So with that in mind, you have to keep in mind that when you're using an exotic like what's it called? What is it called? The Shards of Galanor. When you're using an exotic like Shards of Galanor, that is based on super uptime on a one-time use super, more often than not, you're not going to be getting those glorious team wipe kills with your super because people just tend not to cluster up as much anymore. The TTK is much faster. The movement is much more rapid and improved since the release of Destiny 2 in year 1. And there have been a lot of balancing changes that have affected the way that this game is played in the competitive venue or in the competitive playlist. And I think for the most part, movement modes are favored more often than just outright power. You will end up seeing those and hearing about the Ursa Furiosa builds and the Nova Warp builds and all those kinds of things running around in the Crucible, and those builds have merit in in and around the mechanic that they're using to generate orbs as far as the Ursa Furiosa thing is concerned. And Ursa Furiosa, I do think, needs a bit of a tuning patch when we're considering the potency of the ability uptime granted through the Ursa Furiosa and the damage received while using your block mechanism in that super. But outside of that, and outside of tactics, Blade Barrage is actually paired a lot with Ursa Furiosa because of its potency. You also see a lot of Nova Warps paired with Ursa Furiosa, and if you're really looking at the sandbox in general, I'm mentioning a lot of different subclasses and the way that they interact together, and that's what makes them really S tier. Blade Barrage is probably the best shutdown super in the game. Tether or the Deadfall Trap from the top tree of Way of the Trapper that I detailed in the video earlier has some utility similar to a shutdown super, that you gain a little bit of map control and you can de-emphasize the power of your opponents, but Blade Barrage just outright kills everything. And more often than not, in a competitive venue, killing everything is a lot better than stopping everything, because it really, really halts any momentum whatsoever. And when you're ensuring a kill on a super in the Crucible in a competitive venue, guaranteeing orbs for your teammate, and you're participating in promoting a better team composition and a better position for your team while you're in the match. Now, the other things to note are the throwing knives, the knife trick. The knife trick is not similar to the other knife tactics in the other gunslinger classes. It's not a singular knife. It's technically called Fan of Knives, and you throw 3 knives that inflict burn damage. So your damage output with Fan of Knives tends to be a little bit variable as far as consistency goes. It won't always be the same. And that's a skill. Lining up your Fan of Knives is a skill that takes practice and time to get used to, when and where your knives throw and line up, and you can use your mobility and your movement to adjust the trajectory of your Fan of Knives. And when you start getting a feel for lining up your knives as good as possible, I don't really do a good job of showing that kind of stuff in this this video. And that last engagement just infuriated me. But I'm sorry, I got sidetracked by that last section of the clip. I don't do a good job of detailing and showing the Fan of Knives in this clip. I really just kind of emphasized the movement available to hunters using Stompies, how they pair with Chaperone and Luna's Howl, and how that can be very effective when you're using a very aggressive and mobility-centric subclass. I think that the Blade Barrage is a very prime example of what it means to be an aggressive hunter, to be in and out and doing a lot of damage and manipulating and taking advantage of your movement modes, taking advantage of your synergy pieces, and exploiting that as much as possible while maintaining good power in the map. So I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.